Beloved teacher Christy Mirack was about to leave her flat for one of her last sessions before winter break, only days before Christmas in 1992. She had wrapped Christmas presents for her students. However, the 25-year-old never made it into the elementary school in Lancaster County. An hour later, her school principal discovered her dead, lying scattered across the living room floor, following what Lancaster County District Attorney Craig Stedman later described as a brutal struggle. The crime scene was littered with the gifts that Mirack had wrapped with such care. For decades, the murder haunted the quiet Pennsylvania community, famed for its Amish farms and wholesome beliefs, until genetic genealogy discovered an improbable perpetrator hidden in plain sight. Less than 48 hours prior to her passing, Mirack went out dancing with her close-knit circle of college friends, her pupils, and her family. Before she passed away, Mirack was a vibrant and committed educator who lived for her pupils, her family, and her close-knit circle of college friends with whom she had gone out dancing less than a week before. We would visit various clubs where we most likely introduced ourselves. "Come have a fun look at us while we're here," Andre Canning, a Dateline correspondent, was later informed by one of her friends. Several of the girls, including Mirack, had moved into an apartment block outside of Lancaster's downtown after graduating from college. As a teacher, Mirack started her ideal career. Being an excellent teacher was not enough for her. She aspired to be outstanding. Then, Principal Harry Goodman remarked, she was imaginative and inspired the children. They were enthralled. Where some individuals forced themselves to work, Christy refused to see it as labor. Mirack would always arrive before 8 in the morning. On December 21, 1992, however, Mirack did not show up at her normal time in the morning. When the pupils started to show there at 8:30 a.m., Goodman started to get worried. He kept calling her flat, he called her relatives, and he left for her flat, figuring that he would probably find her there, hampered by automobile issues. He arrived at her apartment building just after 9 in the morning and saw her car was still unmoved in the parking lot. As Goodman got closer to her flat, he noticed something unsettling. The door was slightly open. The 25-year-old was discovered dead. Given that Mirack was still wearing her gloves when her killer forced her back inside and attacked her, police reasoned that she had been leaving the house at the time. Stedman stated, "I think she was pretty quickly overpowered. I mean, where she was murdered was not far away at all from the entry point." Investigators were aware that the murderer had to be bold to carry out the daylight attack, but they were unsure of the motive behind the teacher's murder. Roommate Mary Lesko said to the police that she had left their flat at around 7 in the morning, observing that Mirack appeared disoriented, but she was unsure of the reason. As police delved deeper into Mirack's private life, they learned that, prior to her passing, she had been seeing an older guy, Dagger, who was perhaps 20 years her senior. Though Dagger had served as the local Teamsters president, Mirack appeared dedicated to her, although her friends had not been impressed. One of her acquaintances recalled the strange match and said, "I think she felt cared for. I don't even know how, whether that was financially or what." Even though her friends didn't know much about Dagger, they were aware that he wasn't in a rush to tie the knot, which might have bothered her, according to them. Then, Mirack informed her friends that their relationship was ending just 2 days before she was killed. Her secret suitor became the subject of suspicion following an unsettling incident that occurred at Mirack's school the day after her death. A man who said he was going to see the teacher and hadn't realized she had passed away was stopped in the hallway by one of the school administrators, according to the report. Police later identified the visitor as Dagger. However, Dagger had a perfect alibi, even if the school administrator was suspicious about the visit at the time of the murder. He and his wife had moved to Virginia a few months ago, hundreds of miles away. Additionally, the man provided a DNA sample, but it didn't match the samples of DNA discovered at the scene of the sexual assault. The option of a paid hit was also ruled out by the investigators, who pointed out that hired hitmen usually do not engage in physical confrontation with their victims or leave behind evidence, such as DNA. When concerns surfaced about whether Goodman, the administrator who had driven to Mirack's house, had been a bit overly worried about his instructor being missing, police even looked into Goodman. After Goodman's alibi was verified, and his DNA was found not to match the evidence found at the scene, he was later ruled out. Steedman stated, "We examined suspect after suspect." Just prior to the murder, Mirack's neighbors claimed to have seen a white automobile outside her apartment. Nevertheless, the scant evidence provided to detectives prevented them from identifying any possible suspects. The case eventually became cold. Decades later, police chose to work with Paraborn Nanolabs to employ cutting-edge DNA technology to identify the killer's genetic phenotype. In 2016, investigators discovered that Mirack's killer was of mixed European and Latino ancestry. Using the DNA data, they produced a sketch of the killer's possible appearance. Although the sketch yielded no credible suspects, officials eventually received the break they needed when advances in genetic genealogy allowed them to identify the killer's family through searches of public DNA databases a few years later. Raymond Rowe, a well-liked local DJ, was identified as the suspected murderer. Despite having no known relationship to Mirack, Rowe frequently went by the moniker DJ Freeze and was a DJ at several of the well-known clubs at the time of the murder. Steedman thought it was feasible since Rowe's day job had been near Mirack's flat. Rowe drove past her apartment complex a lot. "I believe it was intended." Regarding the potential reason, Steedman stated, "I believe that she had met him at some previous event, and my guess is, had refused him, and he saw her out there at that flat at some point." Rowe's DNA was found to match the evidence found at the crime site, according to investigators. Rowe entered a guilty plea to the rape and murder in 2019, but in 2021, he attempted to revoke that plea based on Lancaster Online. Anu Cinque was a successful law student living in a Canberra townhouse with her beloved boyfriend, Joe Cinque. She invited some friends around for a casual dinner party. Little did they know, this wasn't going to be like any other party. In 1997, she gave her pals a perplexing warning. A crime was going to be committed before friends could arrive. The threat was not taken seriously by any of the attendees that evening. However, Cinque passed out before the evening was over. After giving him a huge amount of heroin via injection, Cinque had tainted his cup of coffee with a date-rape drug. It took her 36 hours to summon paramedics, and by then, Cinque was too late to be saved. On a night out in Newcastle in 1995, Joe Cinque encountered Anu Cinque. The 22-year-old graduate instantly captured the attention of the attractive young engineer. The couple subsequently moved far away from Newcastle, with Cinque making the weekend trip from Newcastle to be with his lover when Cinque moved to Canberra to start a law degree at the Australian National University. Despite the fact that Cinque was reportedly smitten by Cinque, his escalating frequency of visits appears to be motivated by worry for his girlfriend's welfare. Joe's parents, Maria and Nino Cinque, saw the change in their son and became concerned that their son would be too unstable for his love interest. In her book, Joe Cinque's Consultation, Helen Gardner describes a conversation in which Maria cautioned her son against allowing Cinque to dominate him with her persistent demands. "I love you, but she needs me." He begged his mother not to force him to choose between the two of them. Cinque eventually relocated to Canberra as well, in order to live with Cinque full-time. And although acquaintances report that the pair seemed content at times, Cinque's mental health kept deteriorating. Anu Cinque suffered from gastrointestinal problems, but the cause eluded medical professionals. She was doing amphetamine experiments, and maybe because of this, she would often get paranoid and think there were things crawling beneath her skin. She once informed her mother that she experienced dissociative symptoms and that it felt like her head was resting on top of someone else's body. In addition, she had acquired bulimia due to her obsession with her beauty. She experimented with several purging methods, such as using the medication ipecac, which causes vomiting, and spent hours in the gym. This latter point served as the foundation for one of the arguments made by the prosecution during her murder trial. Cinque felt that her medical difficulties were caused by the ipecac, and she held Cinque responsible for informing her about it during a casual talk. At another point, Cinque told a friend that it was unjust that Cinque was untouched by her illness after becoming certain she had HIV, according to episode 130 of the True Crime Podcast case file. She declared that she was going to smear his toothbrush with a drop of her infected blood. She then declared to another acquaintance that she planned to embark on a murderous rampage, taking the lives of Cinque, Simon, her ex-boyfriend, and any medical professional she thought had misdiagnosed her. Her companion replied, "I've studied psychiatric texts, and it wouldn't be too hard to convince someone that you're insane." In 1997, Cinque discussed her desire to take her own life with a number of friends and acquaintances in the months of September and October. She originally intended to shoot herself, but after discussing heroin overdose with a known drug user on campus, she had second thoughts. After buying 0.5 gram of heroin, she was instructed on how to inject. She then went back to get an additional gram. When the drug dealer inquired as to why she needs so much, Cinque responded, "Someone's coming with me." The events of the second dinner gathering went pretty much as expected. Surprisingly, a few of the student visitors knew that Cinque was preparing a suicide pact, but they chose not to try to stop or get help. Later, some attendees stated that they hadn't truly believed she was sincere about her goals. Ultimately, the visitors left. Cinque's coffee included 6 crushed Rohypnol pills and an unidentified date rape medication that Cinque had slipped in. She gave him multiple heroin injections over the course of the following 36 hours. She once went to buy more and then came back to shot up her unconscious partner one more before phoning the ambulance. Upon eventually contacting emergency services, she declined to provide them with the accurate address. Between Cinque's dinner party and the dispatch of paramedics, a day and a half later, she called a few acquaintances to explain what she was doing. They were told that Cinque was vomiting blood, taking one breath every 10 seconds, and that his lips had turned blue. By the time paramedics got there, Cinque was too late to be saved. Anu Cinque was put on trial for the murder, but due to her mental instability at the time of Cinque's death, she was ultimately convicted with the lesser charge of manslaughter. She only completed 4 of her 10-year sentence, using that time to finish her master's degree in criminology. Since then, she has authored a thesis on female offenders and the reasons behind their crimes, which she published a condensed version of as an e-book under the title Offending Women. In the tranquil Connecticut hamlet of Cheshire, on July 23, 2007, Jennifer Petit went into a bank and requested to take out $15,000 from her account. She explained to the horrified bank employee that her husband and 2 daughters were being taken captive and that she needed the money and that giving it to their captors so they would not hurt them. Sadly, the hostage situation quickly turned deadly, leading to the now famous Cheshire murders. Up until then, many people believed that nothing horrible ever transpired in the town of Cheshire. However, the serenity of the village was destroyed that July. Jennifer and her family, her husband, William Petit, and daughters Hayley, 17, and Michaela, 11, had led a typical suburban life. Then, 2 robbers broke into the family's charming Cheshire house in the dark of night. Even though their original aim was to just rob the property, the home invasion quickly turned violent, killing the majority of the Petit family and setting their house on fire. This is the terrifying account of the Cheshire killings in 2007. The Petit family had a somewhat typical lifestyle. Jennifer was a nurse, and William was an endocrinologist. Their 11-year-old daughter Michaela had a growing love for cooking, and their 17-year-old daughter Hayley was getting ready to go to Dartmouth in the autumn. While the Petit family was middle class and resided in a straightforward two-story home at 300 Sorghum Mill Drive, the Cheshire killers had more tumultuous origins. The younger burglar, Joshua Komisarjevsky, was adopted at a young age and was diagnosed with oppositional defiant disorder. Although he grew up in a wealthy family, he had a challenging upbringing. Among his adopted siblings, Komisarjevsky was both the abuser and the victim. Komisarjevsky's fervently devout parents disapproved of his treatment and said that his ultimate descent into criminality was the result of a demonic cult. Following his start of drug usage and break-ins, Komisarjevsky met Linda Hayes, his co-conspirator in the Cheshire murders. After the Cheshire killings, Linda Hayes, born Stephen Hayes, changed their name while incarcerated. Nevertheless, the New York Times reports that they did not state which pronouns they used. Hayes' early years were comparable to Komisarjevsky's in many aspects. Hayes was also abused as a child, and in order to fund his drug habit, he turned to petty larceny. In 2006, Hayes and Komisarjevsky met at a halfway house, where they quickly became friends. A year or so later, the worlds of Hayes and Komisarjevsky would crash brutally with the Petit family. Linda Hayes and Joshua Komisarjevsky did not enter the small house at random. The day prior to the Cheshire killings, on July 22, 2007, Komisarjevsky saw Jennifer Hogg Petit and her daughter Michaela at the neighborhood Stop and Shop. He was delighted by their abode and followed the couple home. In his confession, Komisarjevsky told police, "I started thinking it's a very nice house and a very nice car and thought it would be nice to be there someday, not having to worry about stress or money issues." Komisarjevsky called in Hayes. The two then broke into the Petit family's house at around 3 in the morning. William Petit had dozed off while reading the paper in the sunroom when they discovered him there. Komisarjevsky took a baseball bat from nearby and began hitting him with it. After tying up Petit in the basement, they proceeded upstairs to see Hayley in her room and Michaela with her mother, who had slept off while reading Harry Potter. Before beginning their search of the house, Hayes and Komisarjevsky covered the heads of Jennifer, Michaela, and Hayley with pillowcases and fastened them to their beds. After discovering fewer goods than anticipated, Hayes and Komisarjevsky altered their plans. They took hold of Jennifer and made her drive to the Cheshire Bank of America branch with Hayes to take out cash. Jennifer went into the bank and took out $15,000 as Hayes waited in the car. Branch manager Mary Lyons reported that Jennifer appeared terrified. She told me that her family was being kept and that everything would be all right as long as she returned home with the money. Lyons said a decade later, "I just knew from the look on her face and the look in her eyes that she was telling the truth. Her eyes gave me a look from one mother to another." Soon after Jennifer and her abductor drove away, Lyon authorized the withdrawal and contacted the police. Unfortunately, there would be no further sightings of Jennifer Hogg Petit or her daughters. A hostage negotiator was on hand and prepared to step in, but police units dispatched to the Petit residence after the bank called the authorities were told not to enter just yet. The situation inside 300 Sorghum Mill Drive was quickly getting worse while Hayes and Jennifer were gone, and police were waiting for more instructions. After sexually abusing 11-year-old Michaela, Hayes and Jennifer returned to the house, where Komisarjevsky gave Hayes the order to rape Jennifer in order to square things up. Hayes carried out the request. Almost simultaneously, a few things happened while the police were stationed outside. Initially, William breaks free from the cellar, bleeding and cuffed, and bolts from the house while calling for assistance. Then, Hayes killed Jennifer by strangulation. The intruder's last terrible deed was spreading petrol all over the house, covering Michaela and Haley and lighting it with a match. The pair attempted to flee by jumping into the Petit family's car as the fire spread throughout their home. They were taken into custody as soon as they nearly instantly crashed into a police cruiser. After 7 horrific hours, the Cheshire murders had continued until well after 10 in the morning. Michaela Petit, Haley Petit, and Jennifer Hawk Petit all lay dead in the horrifying aftermath of the Cheshire murders. Michaela and Haley both died from smoke inhalation after suffering severe burns, while Jennifer had been strangled to death. Both Commissar Jajewski and Hayes received death sentences after being found guilty of lighting the last fatal match in a separate trial. Nevertheless, Connecticut has since done away with the death penalty. Instead, they will serve their entire lives in jail. William Petit, the lone survivor of the horrific killings in Cheshire, has been forced to start over after the horrific atrocity. Petit established a foundation in memory of his loved ones, and it was via this establishment that he came into contact with Christine Pollock, his second wife. Now, the couple has a little boy. More than 30 years after a young woman was murdered in Mesa, according to the police, they have made an arrest. Following the purported connection between the 58-year-old and the crimes through DNA and fingerprint evidence, Thomas Cox was taken into custody in Colorado Springs and brought back to Arizona. Reports state that on October 16, 1989, Susan Amy Morse was found dead in her Mesa flat after her worried parents sought a welfare check due to her non-attendance at work. Court documents and police news releases state that the 22-year-old suffered physical and sexual abuse, as well as asphyxia via an extension cord. According to officials, she was discovered dead in her bed, with the covers pulled up around her. At the same apartment block, there was another break-in in November of 1990. In that instance, the woman, who was 23 years old, claimed that a guy had entered through a window. When she awoke, the man was still holding a knife to her stomach and assured her that he would only rape her without harming her. The court documents state that woman was sexually attacked but lived. The home's VCR and cash were also taken by the assailant. The cases went unexplained for decades until Cox, whose mother had been living next door to Morris at the time of her murder, was discovered by investigators through a fresh investigation. According to investigators, he had never been regarded as a suspect in any instance. The genetic genealogy method was used to crack the case. By creating a family tree for the suspect using DNA retrieved from the crime scene, authorities were able to identify Cox as a possible suspect in the crimes. A DNA match was verified. Following the establishment of a perimeter around his Colorado Springs residence, detectives found a styrofoam cup, lid, and straw in the garbage that tested positive for DNA found in the crime scene. Additionally, according to investigators, they were able to compare prints taken from Cox for misdemeanor offenses committed in the late 80s and early 90s with a print found on a screen that had been removed from one of the victim's windows. According to local station KSA-TTV, Mesa Police Sergeant Chuck Trapani stated that the survivor was happy to see that the culprit was being taken into custody. Documents indicated that Cox was connected to an attack on an unidentified victim on or around November 13, 1990. According to the court records, Cox was charged with 16 offenses in total, including first-degree murder, sexual assault, burglary, and kidnapping. According to police records, he had been living in Colorado Springs, where he was most recently found. Cox was extradited from El Paso County to Maricopa County on April 23. The $1 million cash bond is being used to hold Cox. A judge rendered the decision to sentence a guy to 50 years in prison for multiple knife-point sexual assaults that occurred in Southern California between 1995 and 1996. 47-year-old Christopher VanBuskirk was taken into custody in Goodyear, Arizona on April 29, 2019, in relation to 4 sexual assaults that occurred 24 years ago. He was charged with 4 counts of the alleged crimes, which took place in San Diego County during 3 months in 1995 after being extradited to San Diego. The first recorded incident of knife-point sexual assault occurred on August 18, 1995, according to investigators. That date was followed by 3 additional such attacks on November 17, 1995. Lieutenant Sean Takuchi of the SDPD told NBC7 that after speaking with the 4 victims in San Diego, investigators revealed that they were all astonished and overjoyed to learn of VanBuskirk's arrest. The first assault, on August 18, 1995, happened on the 11100 block of Claremont Mesa Boulevard near the Tierra Santa Recreation Center. The victim described how she was jogging when she saw VanBuskirk's terrifying masked face emerge from the bushes in her impact statement, which was read aloud to the court by her mother before VanBuskirk's punishment. When the attack occurred, she was 18 years old. "I asked if you were going to rape me, and you said yes," she wrote in her letter. She stated how she was inspected by police and went into detail about the awkward investigation that ensued. "A morning after pill was provided to me in order to prevent me from getting pregnant with your monster spawn. Thank goodness for that." The victim further revealed to the judge that she now experiences panic attacks whenever her teenage daughter goes out on her own. "I am aware that long ago, God in heaven pardoned you. Not that I would be this kind." Finally, she remarked, "And I urge you to read the Bible as you endure your long dark days in your prison cell." On October 10, 1995, there was another assault in the 7300 block of Mesa College Drive. According to Takuchi, the victim was assaulted inside her daughter's flat. In court, the victim read her own impact statement. The woman described how she turned on the lamp with her elbow after arriving at her flat with her hands full. Without any delay, she was seized from behind and her mouth was covered by a gloved hand. "I don't know how long it took because I was so afraid of what was coming next," she claimed. Shortly after the cops were summoned, her boyfriend entered the flat. She recalled that she tried to wipe herself up quickly in the bathroom, but the officers told her not to. "Having to go through an examination to gather samples and proof added to my pain, as if the rape wasn't enough already. I would never want such experience on my worst enemy," she remarked. She continued by outlining the situation for SDPD. Last year, a detective looking into the case knocked on her home to inform her of VanBuskirk's arrest. "I started crying out of amazement and incredulity. I believed that I would pass away without ever knowing who had assaulted me. I wanted to hug the detective, but I couldn't. I asked him to leave and come back with a woman so I could feel safe giving him a hug," she said. She begged the judge to impose the harshest punishment possible on VanBuskirk. On November 14, 1995, the third sexual assault occurred when the woman was attacked inside her house in the 3800 block of Catamarca Drive. She described how she returned home after a college class in her victim statement. When the rape occurred, she was 20 years old. A masked man accosted her inside, put a knife to her throat, and threatened to murder her if she made any noise. "The terror and fear that I experienced is not something I can explain," she stated. In the 24 years since the rape, that anxiety has accompanied her every day. "I've made life decisions such as not having children because I felt like it would be impossible to protect them from bad things. I will never get over this experience. I've always been afraid of being alone myself. The problems with trust and its detrimental effects never go away." She continued, and he did this to me. On November 17, 1995, 3 days later, the suspect attacked once more. At that time, a victim in the 1900 block of Missouri Street was attacked inside her house. Investigators gathered DNA samples in each of the 4 cases. The 4 samples were all from the same suspect, but the detectives were unable to identify him at the time. The San Diego Police Department joined the Combined DNA Index System in 1999, but even then, investigators were unable to match the mystery DNA samples taken during the sex crimes 4 years earlier. Both instances were still unresolved. Then, DNA samples from 2 victims of sexual assaults in Riverside County were taken in November 2004 and March 2002. At knife point, the 2 victims were attacked. The samples matched the 1995 case mystery samples from SDPD. Investigators finally got their major break in the case they had been chasing for nearly 15 years. The FBI was contacted for assistance by the SDPD's Sex Crime Unit in February 2019. Together, the 2 organizations were able to identify a possible suspect, VanBuskirk, in each of the 6 sexual assault cases by using publicly accessible genealogical databases. Authorities used their investigation to find VanBuskirk's immediate family members, whose DNA was then linked to samples taken from the crime locations. VanBuskirk was apprehended after investigators tracked him down in Arizona, where he had most recently resided. Following VanBuskirk's arrest, an extradition document was filed with the Maricopa County Superior Court in Arizona, revealing that the suspect is married and has a child. For the previous 7 years, he had resided in Goodyear, Arizona, with his family, according to the paperwork. According to investigators, San Diego police should be contacted immediately by anyone who thinks they might have been a victim of VanBuskirk. If you find this video compelling, show your support by giving it a thumbs up, subscribing to our channel, and ringing that notification bell. By doing so, you'll stay updated on our latest investigations and mysteries. Your support means the world to us as we continue to pursue the truth in the world of unsolved cases.